and we launched in January 2011, a week before the revolution in Egypt. Yeah, we just launched, and then we had a revolution. We had at that point, we had some internet cut off for a couple of weeks. We had companies not hiring for months. Yeah, and so this is when we first launched, and even our government funding back then also stopped because of the situation back then in 2011. Yeah, a lot of difficult circumstances. We had to bootstrap for almost 3 years after this period, almost shut down a couple of times.
That was the voice of Ameer Sherif, chairman and founder of Basharsoft. Basharsoft is the maker of Wuzzuf and Forasna, the online hiring platforms. Ameer is also a venture partner at Khwarizmi Ventures. I am your host, Ali Zwail, and this is the Startups Arabia podcast, where you learn about the Arab startups ecosystem from the best founders, investors, and operators in the region. Welcome to the Startups Arabia podcast. My guest today is Ameer Sherif. Ameer is the founder and chairman of Basharsoft, the company behind Wuzzuf and Forasna, Egypt's leading online employment platforms for both white-collar and blue-collar workers, respectively. Collectively, both platforms impacted the lives of 7 million plus job seekers in Egypt and helped 70,000 plus companies hire more than 1 million people over the past years. He's raised a total of $12 million in VC funding along the way, and he's built a team of over 300 employees. Today, he leads the company's expansion into Saudi Arabia, the GCC, and Africa. In 2019, he was selected as an Endeavor entrepreneur and named a young global leader by the World Economic Forum. He also sits on the board of EasyTrans, a publicly listed logistics company, and ITIDA, the executive arm of the Ministry of ICT, helping set strategies for Egypt on digitalization, innovation, and entrepreneurship. He's also a venture partner with Khwarizmi Ventures, a $70 million MENA-focused VC fund based in KSA, where he spent 2 years as a partner and continues to advise portfolio founders. He holds a master's degree in computer engineering, a bachelor's in electrical and communications engineering from Cairo University. He's also completed executive programs on public policy at the Harvard Kennedy School and business leadership executive programs at MIT, Stanford, INSEAD, and HBS. It was a wide-ranging conversation. Ameer was open and helpful, as he always is with his advice, and I know you're going to enjoy this. Welcome to the Startups Arabia podcast. My guest today is Ameer Sherif. Ameer is the founder and chairman of Basharsoft. I generally always enjoy whatever subject I'm discussing with Ameer, so I am sure that you will also enjoy this discussion. Welcome, Ameer.
Thank you, Ali.
So, Ameer, maybe we can start with in just a few minutes, tell us the story of how you came to be in this wonderful world of startups.
Yeah, so I graduated from Cairo University Engineering back in 2004. And when I graduated, I started on doing my master's in the same university. And then I had one of my, influential, most influential professors back then, Dr. Hussam Fahmi. He was he just came back from doing a PhD at Stanford, and he was, teaching us this uh, technical writing course, and he gave us a task, researching different topics, and I landed on entrepreneurship in Silicon Valley. That was back in 2004. In Egypt, it's, startups and entrepreneurship were not that common. Even the terminology, not even the concept. And back then, I landed on a website saying like these are the top 20 millionaires under 20. Okay, and I was like sort of, very surprised of the title, and I thought to myself like, what's what do people have over there that we don't have, and why shouldn't we be building those cool tech startups solving challenging and impactful problems. And yeah, since then I started searching for different ideas, applying to different, back then we had like startup competitions, trying to get some initial funding. And it took me like 4 years from then to actually get accepted in a program, which was the first incubator program run by in Egypt, which was run by the government entity called ITIDA here with the Ministry of ICT. And we got accepted and started our business in 2009, trying to solve the job market and employment problem in Egypt.
Cool. So basically, you were like, you started just wanting to be an entrepreneur with an internet business, and you kept thinking about ideas, and until you landed on this one.
Yeah,
Um,
actually, it
why
wasn't
did
my
you?
idea. It wasn't actually
Oh,
my idea. Like I tried. I didn't have an initial idea, so I reached out to some friends who had their own ideas, and we applied with different ideas every time. And this was actually my co-founder's idea back then, Muhammad Garhi. He had this idea. He told me like, I'm thinking of doing one, two, three. I said, yeah, that seems like an interesting problem, which I faced myself when I was searching for a job in Egypt back then. We Most companies when we started were still posting their job listings in printed newspapers. For us, it was exciting enough, a big problem to solve. Yeah.
interesting. Okay, so you landed at ITIDA. I'm guessing you like created an initial version of the website. But Wuzzuf, it's a two-sided marketplace. So you have employers on one side, job seekers on the other. And when you first started, this must have been extremely problematic. Companies want to find job seekers on the platform when they join, and vice versa. So how did you fix this chicken and egg problem when you first started out?
Yeah. So when we started, first of all, like we decided like not to reinvent the wheel. We knew there were like different models out there. We studied all the best models everywhere, the top websites in the US and Europe and so on. And when it took us like a while to get our first product launched to the market. First time founders rookie mistake, and we launched in January 2011, a week before the revolution in Egypt. Yeah, we just launched, and then we had a revolution. We had at that point, we had some internet cut off for a couple of weeks. We had companies not hiring for months. Yeah, so this is when we first launched, and even our government funding back then also stopped because of the situation back then in 2011. Yeah, a lot of difficult circumstances. We had to bootstrap for almost 3 years after this period, almost shut down a couple of times. But yeah, that's how we started. And then, so it wasn't just the chicken or egg problem. We had these problems, and then we worked on the chicken or egg problem for another 3 years until we had like initial traction 2013 and then 2014. Yeah, this was trying to push on the demand side, supply side. We had very little funding available at the time. There were very few VCs in Egypt, maybe like one or two, maybe one or two across the whole MENA region, and nobody outside Egypt was, had any interest to invest in a country that was at the time very unstable.
Right. But did you start with the demand side or the supply side? I'm supposing demand is the job, the employers, right? In
Yeah, it
your case,
depends how
because they
you look at
pay.
it. In our case, yeah, the companies are demand, and people and talent. These are we consider the supply, and in a two-sided marketplace, you have to start with, you have to do both at the same time. And we
Mm,
initially we got jobs. If we have jobs without candidates, companies wouldn't come again. If we have people looking for jobs
exactly.
without any jobs, would not come again. We had to push small pushes here and there. We didn't have enough funding to market at scale, so we had to do it
Exactly.
hard way.
Yeah, it's precisely because you didn't have enough funding that it's really interesting to understand. So, I mean, I imagine you had to do a lot of stuff that doesn't scale, stuff that might not make sense for someone starting today with good funding to start
Yeah,
on both
yeah.
sides.
From 2011 to 2013. So because we didn't have any kind of funding and we didn't have initial traction, we actually had to do some work on the side, like sort of a service company building, other, small recruitment software for different entities who saw our platform. They liked the product, but they told us like, we need to, we want you to build us similar systems to use internally. These were like large corporates, and this was like a big part of the cash that kept us alive for the next 2 to 3 years.
Okay, so you went to them, you're telling them, come on our platform. They say, hey, we like your platform. Customize it for us internally, right?
Yeah, build
And
us our.
our own platform, so to speak. Make us your competitors. And of course, you needed the money, so you had to go for that. But you have to get them jobs. But for your main platform, you have to get jobs seekers on the platform, right? How did you do that? How did you let people know? Or was it very easy? Did people, as soon as was their word of mouth, and as soon as somebody found out, they told their friends to get on the platform?
Yeah, definitely it was very challenging at the start. We did a lot of work on SEO to get organic traffic to the website from both sides. What we did well is that we, even with very small number of people on the platform, we had very strong and accurate matching algorithms from the get-go. That when we received applicants, we would score them and rank them in a way that makes us uh, make the most out of our database. And also one of our when we received our one of our biggest brands or clients back then, one of the first ones were Vodafone, sort of landed on the website, wanting to try it, probably organically. And when we got this first well-known company who were hiring call center masses, we created those social media posts, and we used them like on Facebook, and they sort of went viral. And this was like the first time you know companies like in our space use social media in Egypt to advertise jobs. And back then, before Facebook ads was common, and organic content still had a ton of reach, we had like thousands
Yep.
of interactions on every post organically, just by getting using the company and the jobs and promoting it in some way. So we used to use the company's brand to attract talent, and then this also attracts smaller companies, and then this got us more jobs, and we promoted those, and then we just kept pushing back and forth. We started like in from 2011 to 2012 we didn't charge any money, which was another mistake. But when we started charging, like first we had like 20,000 Egyptian pounds of subscriptions per month, that eventually grew to 50K Egyptian pounds, and then 100, 200. Yeah, it took us some time until 2013 or 14 when we 2013 when we became sort of ramen profitable, and it's just covering our basic costs.
Interesting. So you say it was a mistake not to charge money at the beginning, even though it probably helped you grow faster, right? Why was it a mistake?
No, we thought that we needed to reach a certain point until we charge companies, and we later on learned that we could have charged earlier. And yeah, it helps you test the market better, helps you test how people will receive your product. But we did also a lot of experimentation on the pricing. One of the things that we had as a differentiator, other than the matching algorithm, was the pricing. So we were the first in Egypt and the region to have a pricing that is more of SaaS subscription, tiered pricing for companies of different sizes on a job site.
Right.
Back then, most job sites had standard price per job listing. So, and we thought this didn't make sense, because why make a large multinational pay the same as a small business? This was the model all over other platforms, and we created this idea of an unlock, where companies would pay only for the number of people they would need to contact or hire. So a company that's hiring hundreds call center agents or sales agents would pay much more to consume more unlocks than a company that's hiring just one person. We had different ways of approaching the problem, and it worked out eventually.
Yeah, I love that there's like no one magical solution, that you just there were so many small things that you did that accumulated. The content marketing and the SEO on one side, improving the matching algorithm so that people will be more effective as a platform, and so you get better feedback that way. Playing with the business model in a way that makes more sense for people. All these things, I think, are seem small, but really this innovating on many fronts at the same time can really make a huge difference, I feel. And you guys did a great job persevering through that very tough time, as I heard.
Yes, one example, also another small example of trying new stuff. We had, because we had limited budgets for marketing, we thought like, how can we re-engage users to come again to the website? We had these email job alerts. Not really job alerts. It's like based on your profile, we would recommend jobs and send them to you. And then we had like the open and click rates were not that attractive, so we did some extreme personalization on the email. We gave the sender a name, and we had like the email seemed super personalized. We named our persona Nancy, and Nancy, she sent those emails, and we had like open and click rates in the emails reached 90% almost. And that was like almost more than 10 years ago. And today, like, Nancy is the most common, most well-known, famous, you can say, bot here in Egypt. Like, hundreds of thousands of people know her by name, Nancy Farid. Yeah, and this is another small innovation that helps us reach very high engagement with our users. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's incredible how having constraints can actually almost kickstart innovation and catalyze innovation. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, wonderful. So I mean, you guys, you really persevered for a lot of years before things even started to break even, and there was no venture capital funding available and all that. What made you keep at it?
Uh, yeah, first I was very, passionate about doing something. I've seen people do it in Silicon Valley. I've read about them. I believe that we could do something here, and I knew we were solving a big problem. So it's like it's not that this is like a small market or people don't use it, don't need it. Like I've seen other similar job sites everywhere. Every country has more than one, multiple successful job sites. Egypt, a country with more than 100 million people, needs, should have one, a local platform. So the problem is big, the problem is there, the model has been proven elsewhere. It's just like we need to figure it out. And these early few years, we had to, because there wasn't enough funding, we had to borrow from friends and family. And this added even more pressure, that I need to, I don't want my family and friends to lose their money they've put with me, their trust. And also the social pressure from the markets, others who are telling like, go get a real job, and like, if I just quit, I would prove them right, and I need to keep going until it works. And yeah, I was lucky enough that we were able to make it eventually.
Yeah, I love it. And Amir, you strike me as more of an introvert than you are an extrovert. Am I right?
Yeah, I'm definitely an
Um,
introvert.
Yeah. So, and yet you probably need to do a lot of selling to get Wuzzuf off the ground. I mean, how do you reflect on that?
Yeah, so most of our successful fundraising didn't happen because I'm good at sales or good at pitching. I'm actually like below average when it comes to sales and pitching compared to other founders. I've learned this, confirmed this more even when I went on the VC side. Found that there are founders who are much way better than me at doing that. But the way we were able to fundraise was eventually after getting the traction. People were attracted to the traction, were attracted to the perseverance we had. Um, the first, so sort of institutional or series investment, we it was still very small at the time. So when we didn't find any local or regional investors, I started to think like, is there like any crazy investors out there in the world who would, outside the region, who would consider investing in a country like Egypt at this state? And I started searching online and applying for different programs, and one of those was 500 startups. I did some research, found that this is like was like back then at the time, this was like the first well-known Silicon Valley program that did actually consider global startups. I applied 2013, also got rejected. After hundreds of other regional rejections as well. But eventually, there was this program. We had this acceleration in Egypt, Flat Six Labs, and they were flying to on a trip to Amman in Jordan to meet some U.S. investors. And one of my advisors back then, Con O'Donnell, told me like there's this program. Flat Six are taking their founders to Amman for to pitch some investors from the US. It was like a program called Geeks on a Plane that was run by
Yep.
Dave McClure, the founder of 500. And
Hmm.
I like I knew, oh, this is the program that I applied to before and got rejected. I was very reluctant to go. Actually, my advisor mentor back then called me, like he actually got me the ticket to fly there. I was like sort of on a very short budget, and I had completely lost hope in fundraising. He got me this uh, ticket. He told me you don't even have to stay there. You'll go and return same day. Book a flight and return from the same day. Uh, yeah, so I went there. Like I pitched them, and he was like wearing back then. Egypt and Tahrir Square was something very cool around the world. He
Hmm.
was wearing a Tahrir Square T-shirt that the fonts of Foursquare. Okay, so it was like
Right.
something cool. People all over the world seeing what happened in Egypt in 2011. I was telling him like, please, you're wearing this shirt. Make your shirt happy. Invest in and make your first investment in Egypt. He was very reluctant. Like, I don't know much about Egypt. Like, just try us. We had distraction during a revolution. He told me like, okay, just try applying again. I applied. He put me on a waiting list, and eventually we became the first startup from Egypt and one of the first from the region to join a well-known Silicon Valley accelerator program. That was in January 2014. And this was like a big breakthrough for us to. It was just a small initial ticket, was 50K for us. This was $50K dollars. This was big for us. Helped me pay some repay some debt that we had. And then when we went there, we went through the program, very eye opening as well. We got another ticket from 500, and also got another angel investor from there, who was Amr Awadallah, the founder of Audera back then. And yeah, and since then we've been sort of like uh, the company was able to at last have initial, some funding, and we were already sort of profitable. We kept growing. 2014, 2015, we also did another round, the Series A, with European investors who were very focused on marketplaces in emerging markets. So that was really nice. They actually reached out based on us being out there on TechCrunch after joining 500, and then we got more and more investors. Yeah, we had like 95% of our investments were international from Europe and the US. We only had one investor locally, that was Endure Capital. We also had A15 back then. OT Ventures put a small ticket. Majority of our investments were global investors. Yeah.
Incredible. And I think you were the first Egyptian or Middle Eastern company in 500 as well. So you kind of opened the way for many other companies, right?
Back then, so after this, in 2015 or 16, a couple of years later, 500 established their regional presence with an office in the region. I did refer a couple of startups after us that went also in 2015 and 2016, and then they also had some from Jordan as well, and then they started the regional presence, which was Fund 500 Falcons, and then of years later, there was like 100, 200 investments from 500, all across the region. Now they have offices in Saudi, in Egypt, and everywhere in the region. Yeah.
Incredible. Just 10 years. How much progress has been made. But, you need the people who get out there first. So going back to your early days, when were you confident that you had product market fit? What were the signs?
Yeah. The science is that we actually did deliver on what companies needed. We had like companies posting their jobs. So whenever a company posted its jobs, we took those jobs, we posted them on social media, everywhere. We did the distribution to get them applicants, and then we had this algorithms. We did some follow up directly with the clients. We had a very small team, like 5 or 6 people for the first like 3 years. Okay, so we had very close interaction with the clients. We did a lot of iterations. Like one of our biggest failures, for example, before reaching product market fit, is that when I did this global research of top job sites, and there were countries like in the US where there's like a postal code. People are very used to putting postal codes, or selecting eventually selecting their location on a map. I took this and put it on Wuzzuf for companies and job seekers to pick their position on a map in 2011 and 2012. And this was like a complete failure in Egypt, because people weren't really that used to picking their locations or maps, and on most browsers back then did not auto detect the locations. But we had a lot of features that we put in there based on our global research, and eventually spent a lot of time throwing them out. So we did a lot of it until at one point companies were satisfied with what we with our service, with our platform, with our database, and they started paying, and paying again, and so on. And this was like it just continued. Yeah, when you have like one client, there's a saying: when you have like one client, you can get like 10 paying clients. If you get 10, you can get 100, and that's how you've people are willing to pay.
Right. Yeah. Paying customers are the best proof. I
Yeah.
think that up till now, I mean, over 1 million people have found jobs on the two platforms, Wuzzuf and Forasna. I don't know how much exactly right now, but more than 1 million, I heard. And, in a country like Egypt with very high unemployment, that's a huge positive impact that you're having on society. When you first started, I mean, where did you think you'd end up? What did you want to achieve? Did you think you'd have this impact?
So, yeah, so we wanted to solve job search and employment problems and recruitment problems in Egypt. That's we knew this was a big problem. We didn't know like how big can it get. Today we have, so we started with Wazzaf, which was white collar focused. The platform is in English. And eventually we saw a lot of companies approaching us asking for blue collar drivers, technicians, and so on. In Egypt, this kind of this segment is mostly using and speaking in Arabic. We decided that like we need to have another platform that's catered for this segment, and this is when we did like our Series A in 2015, which was again was like the first funding announcement about Egypt in on TechCrunch in 2015. And then we launched Forasna as platform on Arabic, doing the same, but more catered to this segment, which is a much bigger segment in Egypt. Egypt again is like a 100 million population, more than 30 million people in the workforce, uh, and like the white collar sort of segment is like 5 million people. The rest are blue collar and workers and so on. That it's a very sizable market. One of the largest markets in the whole MENA when it comes to population and so on, number of companies. Yeah, it was a big market, one of the biggest in the region, and also in Africa. And today we have 7 million people who are registered across both platforms looking for jobs, and more than 70,000 businesses, majority of whom which are small and medium businesses that use us for their hiring. But yeah, we didn't have we had like plans and business plans and targets to reach, but we had similar numbers. We expected to get them like in the first like 1 or 2 years. We had these ambitious plans, and it took us much longer, but eventually we got there.
Yeah. And I guess that when you in 2015 when you got that Series A, I think it was 1.7 million dollars, right? Which was at the time like a huge number. Now it's just very normal, but at the time it was incredible. What you have a different challenge and different you could say monkey on your back, which is that you have to grow very quickly because you now you have this venture money inside. So what are the what were the challenges you had to grow quickly in terms of all aspects, not just team, and what were the biggest constraints to growing quickly and profitably in our region?
Yeah. So back then, so we were already growing profitable back then because we were initially bootstrapped. We had very strong controls on our spending. But one of the biggest challenges when we got the funding was actually our own hiring, because the ecosystem was very early, very few startups. People don't know what are startups. They're not, they're afraid to work in these companies. They still prefer the large, well-known big tech companies. So this was like one of the biggest challenges. Also, there weren't enough people who were ex startups before. So we had to get people who are we tried people who are purely corporate. Most of them didn't really work out, so we decided to get young fresh graduates and teach them what are startups, how to do customer success, how to do product management. Again, back at the time, product management was not a role or title that's well known in Egypt. Same with design and user experience was not really a thing in Egypt. Customer success, we sort of like we're one of the first companies in Egypt to hire customer success people. Yeah, we were like sort of pioneering the market, and this was always a challenge, which many years later, like now it's like very common to have like hundreds of product managers, hundreds of customer success people, and it's much easier to hire today for those roles than back then.
Yeah, looking back, it's so cool to think about how much progress has been done. It's only been like 9 years since that time, so
Yeah.
maybe it's there's room for optimism after all. Um so okay, when you going to that idea of adding Forasna as a new product, you know, having a new product line or line of business can for a startup can cause a big impact on your focus, stressing your resources. You know, having two threads working at the same time is not easy. So how did you make that decision to actually launch Forasna? Why didn't you, for example, just create an Arabic version of Wuzzuf, or why did you how did you make that decision in general, and how did you manage the product development process?
we made this decision because like we believe that this is a very different segment that needs easier user interface and easier experience. Companies have different or lower expectations on how people would apply. Now a lot of the blue collar segment in Egypt even doesn't have internet access. Some of them, unfortunately, can't even read or write. And we built even a call center with a hotline where people could easily dial in, and we would interview them over the phone in a 5-minute call and build their profiles. So we had data and profiles that were not out there in any other platform in Egypt. That was definitely a problem that we were trying to solve. Yeah, we felt this is like a different segment is very far. We had to build a separate platform. Looking back, it was like a very difficult decision. We also had one of our motivations where out of impact, this is a segment that is more of bottom of the pyramid, less underserved segment. The salaries were much lower. We needed to help those people, but this was like part of the motivation back then. We thought that the market size is much bigger, which was true, but then the monetization proved much more difficult. And running two platforms and building two platforms is like building running two businesses in parallel, which was very challenging looking back. Today, both platforms are profitable, uh, but yeah, it took us a lot of effort. Uh, yeah, I would not advise others to do the same, to do run multiple products unless you're Google, your Apple, your of that size. You consider doing multiple products.
Yeah. Um, I I heard that like the typical like approach in Silicon Valley is kind of if you are doing less than 10 million ARR, you don't open up a new line, and that or and once you have actually it's more about market share. So it's like when you have 5% market share, that means you're in one segment. That's when you start thinking about something else. But before that, it's not worth losing the focus. But we are a very different market, and I really think the impact you guys have done is wonderful. And sometimes great things happen only because you don't realize how hard they're going to be. So that's also sometimes a benefit.
But again, like you mentioned, like some rules for Silicon Valley. Like what I learned is that there are a lot of rules out there from Silicon Valley. Some of them make sense, but others don't make sense in our part of the world. So
Yep, yep,
yeah, you need to figure out what works, what doesn't. And yeah, it's a very different market, very different dynamics. The fundraising dynamics are different, the hiring dynamics are different. Even like in Silicon Valley, it became very common for all people joining startups, for example, to have equity. For many years in Egypt and all across the MENA region, employees, when you told someone like I'm gonna give you equity, early employees, if they're not senior or experienced enough, some of them back then, like they were like skeptical, like you're trying to this, like you're joking. How come I'm gonna get shares in the company? But yeah, the dynamics is very different. It's a very different market.
absolutely. And yeah, I mean, just and this is really a general rule. I totally agree with you. I mean, even if you are in Silicon Valley, not all the rules might apply to your specific case, and you have to kind of get it from first principles. So, I mean, if we're talking about like new products and developments and things like that, there's something in the world today everybody's talking about generative AI. How are you thinking about AI in in the context of Basharsoft, Wuzzuf, Forasna? Will we see totally new products that are serving the same problem?
Yeah, so we're definitely following again. So you know, uh, I'm now looking with a different eye because I've went to the VC side for 2 years. So that's like I'm back to the company only for like less than 6 months now. With this fresh eye, definitely considering in how to best integrate AI and generative AI into our products. We're working on this right now. I'm sort of the type of like when there's like too much advancements happening. I'm the type who like sort of likes to wait a bit to see like where it settles before actually implementing things, because like if I started implementing, if I've seen a lot of companies implementing a lot of applications since ChatGPT came out, and then like 6 months later they find out that there are like 100 more companies doing exactly the same what they're doing, and even then OpenAI and others would launch this completely on top of ChatGPT, and becomes completely irrelevant. The space is moving super fast. What we like is that we were already, before this hype, as I told you, that we had this, our own Nancy Farid, sending emails, very, personalized content. We had very strong algorithms from the get-go. Although they're not like using the latest AI, they were like good enough for us to have a leading market share in Egypt until today. So right now we're strategizing how the type of innovations we're working on for the next 10 years. We're also integrating videos in our platforms as we speak, in different ways, because people are consuming video more, people are generating video more, making the relationship more human and interactive. Some people are taking AI to the extreme when it comes to recruiting, like have AI interview the candidates and so on. I believe this isn't really the best user experience. But candidates seeing the hiring manager and company in video as asynchronously, and companies seeing videos of applicants even before having an interview. I think this is makes sense. Using AI to understand the videos and facilitate it, it's one thing, but then people need to see other people. So yeah, we're trying to integrate video and AI in different ways. Yeah.
Hmm. Okay, that's very interesting. And I'm going to use the your what that you just mentioned. Your time as an investor. You, of course, were for a couple of years. You went to the investor side at Khwarizmi Ventures, and I wanted to ask you, I mean, what do you think founders understand the least when they're pitching to investors? Now that you were on both sides of the table.
So yeah, there is a lot that founders don't get about VCs, and there's a lot also that a lot of VCs don't get about being a founder. When I went there, so on the VC side, so almost like I left my company due to burnout after COVID. Completely burnt out, had to step in as the CEO of the company, and take a break. I took like almost a year completely off. Good thing that the company continued for almost 3 years without me, and and reached profitability again after COVID, which was a very difficult time. So that's a good thing. But again, the decision to leave was difficult. I did not leave it out of choice. um, then going on the VC side, I when I joined on the VC side, it was early, and early 2022, which was sort of the global peak of VC and startups before we had a decline. So it was like from years of bootstrapping and very difficult fundraising to move on the VC side, and then find like companies fundraising crazy amounts, very super easy. It was like at one point it was very depressing for me to see like I've spent my life doing great, and then suddenly companies or founders are raising millions of dollars of slide decks and pitch decks, very easy, very early on, with valuations equivalent to my Series A and Series B back in the time. This was like one of the initial shocks. Of course, this didn't last for long. I felt this was like completely abnormal. Now we're sort of like more of a normal situation. Still, there are some overvaluations in seed stage, in my opinion, in different markets. Of course, the difference between one market and the other. But yeah, back to your question, it, I've noticed that the top VCs in Silicon Valley, they have like like the top 100 VCs, for example. If you looked at it, you would see like 50% of them are operating background, 50% of them are investment background. That's like the rough average. And I think this is what makes the best VC investors into have this diversity and balance. And what you know uh, what founders don't understand is that still in our region, majority of people on the VC side are investment and finance background. So they speak a different language, and how they look at teams, how they look at evaluate companies is very different from the way founders and operators think. And also there's no like a lot of founders and advice sort of does stereotypes about different investors, that this is the way all investors think. What I discovered is that there's a very very wide spectrum of how investors think. It's like the people need to understand who they're talking to and ask for feedback about this specific investor, what they actually look for. Because like you need to ideally either customize to your audience or just have your own story for everyone, and know exactly what you're looking for. Yeah, I think there's a lot of internal dynamics that are not clear to most founders.
Yeah, let us like double click a little on this aspect. So, I mean, when a founder is pitching to an investor that's with an investment background, what are they looking for as an investor?
Again, there's like no single way. All
Of
investors
course,
are.
yeah, but typically, I mean, what's the general kind of average kind of way?
I've seen, at least in my time, with Khwarizmi Ventures, which is a Saudi-based VC, and also seeing the rest of the VC landscape in the region. Majority of VCs in the region, they look at the team, uh, very solid team. If investors who are a bit operating backgrounds, they focus more on the product. Most finance investors don't really look a lot at the product. They look at the team and the market size, and the trends, uh, uh, while operating background investors look at also the team, but the product and less of the market. Me as a product focused founder operator, I believe like the best founders and best teams can figure out their way, even if the market is small. The best teams would be able to pivot. The best teams would be able to adapt their product and to different markets, and be able to monetize in very different ways. uh, yeah, I've been there. I know that most forecasts and plans don't really make sense, but a lot of finance investment background investors, they do look a lot at the market sizing, the plans and so on. And yeah, it's a different mindset. Again, you have to ask for feedback, uh,
Yep,
before you approach any investor.
absolutely. All right, and now you're back to operating the company. So, what's the most significant thing that your investing experience changed in your operating style?
Yeah. First of all, like I'm still involved on the VC side, more of a part-time role supporting our portfolio across different regions. Yeah, I've one of the best things about working in VC is the exposure you get. So suddenly, after spending like 10 years or more focused on just one problem in just one market, suddenly I got this exposure to uh, very close exposure to 30 portfolio companies, and met hundreds of founders. in all industries, in different markets, from Morocco to Pakistan, all across. The level of exposure you get on the VC side is definitely eye opening. And yeah, I've also seen different founders, how they manage and lead their teams. So part of what I did with our portfolio founders, that I had this regular casual one-on-ones, sort of advice and sometimes coaching, being like a sounding board with it. They just can open up, because I'm an operator. They feel uh, free and comfortable to share very fine details which they might not share with other investors they have on their cap table. So this gives me insight. There's no one single successful type of how a founder should manage and lead. I always felt before that there's a right way of doing things, and then discovered that there's no just one way of doing things. There's so many different, very different founder personas can be successful, and companies, the right founders can be successful in whatever market and whatever industry. And yeah, when I came back, uh, part of it is actually to expand our platforms to other markets. I have seen the potential. For example, in Saudi Arabia, is big. Although there is, like, right now a lot of people trying to get into Saudi Arabia, there's still a lot of open spaces there. Yeah, so this was one of the reasons I tried, is to actually expand my company. Also, there's like the dynamics of the currency exchange and devaluation in Egypt versus the US dollar and so on. A lot of different dynamics made me come back for the current time. But I also believe there's, like, the next, how the next 10 years could be like, and where the company could go. Whether I continue for the next 10 years, or I help build new management to enable the company to do that. But I remain very passionate about helping people find jobs. Helping 1 million people get placed in jobs is something I feel the most proud about. Not the amount of money I've raised, or anything else. The amount of lives we've impacted. And I think this company can get to the next 10 million people hired in different markets. It can eventually get to IPO. It's already profitable for a couple of years now. Yeah, I see potential, and definitely from a maturity point of view, having been through all this ups and downs, roller coaster, through COVID, through burnout, going to the on the VC side. Another thing also that I got exposed to is on the public policy side. I joined ITIDA, which was the government entity, that ran the first incubation program that we joined. Eventually, as a board member 3 years ago, that was also eye-opening, how to the ecosystem as a whole works. So yeah, definitely, I'm going back with very different experience. I've also got certified in how boards should run, which is something most startups founders don't get right. Even most VCs don't get it right. But so definitely, I'm coming back with very different experience and maturity. Hopefully, to make a different type of impact.
Great. Yeah, sounds like even more ambitious. And so, can you tell us about Khwarizmi Ventures and what its thesis is?
So Khwarizmi Ventures is an early stage MENA focused fund, investing in founders from the region or connected to the region somehow. Sector agnostic. It's a $70 million fund. We invest in seed and Series A businesses. Sometimes selectively we do late stage investments as well. We have investments in Saudi Arabia, in Egypt, in the UAE, in Morocco, in Pakistan, like Jordan, like all across the region. And yeah, the majority of the team are, they're based in Saudi, but we have like team members in Dubai, in London, and myself between Egypt and Saudi.
Cool. And how does the team make decisions? Are they each partner makes their decision, or the investment committee has to be unanimous? How do they make decisions?
No, no, we have voting. It's not unanimous. We have voting scheme for that. Um, yeah, but I think what's most important about VCs in the region, because the region had so many new funds over the past couple of years. In the GCC, I think more than 30 or 40 funds came up in the past 3 to 4 years. I think what really differentiates one VC or fund from the other is actually the the human relationship, the people connection, and the level of support and value add, which majority of funds in the region are still very new at, since very few have actual operators on board. The funds that have people with operating experience on board are the ones that are able to add actual real value, help companies expand across different markets, help companies hire. We have like in-house talent acquisition people, and so on. So this is actually what makes uh, you know uh, VCs stand out in the region.
Absolutely. And from your like investment exposure, I mean, what are the most promising verticals in the region, in your opinion?
So I'm usually, less of the type that focuses on, the different industries and spaces. I'm more towards, the right team. When I find the right team, even the least exciting space, if you find the right team, I would be more excited than just looking at the space and searching like who are the players in this space. Again, in early markets, there is no specialization for VCs. As markets mature, you find like more specialization. The way it's like in the US and Europe, for example, when you have like SaaS investors, you have fintech, you have marketplace investors, and so on, and health tech, ed tech focused. In the region, still like majority of funds are sector agnostic. Yeah, I'm more of like I need to look like be very excited about the team, and I also don't you know I'm not very excited about investing in a space that's just seeing a lot of hype and excitement. uh, Usually, it's when something is very hot and very exciting, usually it's not the best time to invest in the space.
Right. So you're kind of, you let the founder help you discover something new, that they're excited about it, that they're uniquely able to deliver on, so to speak.
Exactly, have like very deep insights in what they're building.
Right. So back to your early days at Basharsoft, you had a co-founder, and he left at some point. Of course, as you mentioned, it was very hard, and you were bootstrapping in the early days and things like that. And there are always, like, sometimes there are complications related to co-founder, etc. Just generally speaking, reflecting on your experience and what you've seen in the market, how do you recommend to people founding companies today approaching the co-founder relationship? What are the best practices for setting things up to make it successful?
Yeah, usually there are founder complications in a lot of companies. I think ours was not that complicated at the end. Like my co-founder had to leave in 2012. Again, I told you we were almost shutting down in 2011, 2012. So when he was leaving, actually, I was planning to shut down. After a couple of months to finish delivering some of those systems which we're building for some other clients. But actually, he did leave like on we were on very good terms until today. But we had other complications on the cap table with other investors who were planning to come in, and then things didn't work out. Yeah, but in general, back then when we started, founder vesting, for example, was not really common in the region. People didn't know about founder vesting. This was like some complication, like how do you deal with a founder who's leaving without vesting? But thankfully, vesting is much more common these days. Um, yeah, and this used to be very common advice I give to a lot of founders, like people, you need to have founder vesting, proper founder vesting in place. A lot of people didn't take it seriously, but I think now it's sort of commonplace.
Right. Yeah. So that's a great best practice, and uh, I think having choosing the right co-founder is good even when it comes to breakups. So I mean, just having a good open relationship with someone, trusting a trusting relationship, makes it even in the worst case makes it much easier, such as like breaking up.
Yeah, as I
Yeah.
on the founder side, again, the best advice I would like to tell people is that a lot of founders I've seen, they have team members in our region who are from the same backgrounds. You have like a group of technical people or a group of business people, and this is, at least in Egypt, is something that is improving with time, and is definitely much better in more mature markets to have diverse teams. The best startups in Egypt and the region, of course, are the ones with the most diverse background founders.
Yeah. Okay. Going back now to something you said about, that the reason you left the operating side of Waza for a while was, burnout. And you've been very courageous and very outspoken online about the issue of mental health for founders. And so, why do you feel strongly about this? And how do you think, what are kind of the best practices for that? What do you advise founders on that front?
Yeah, so it's like very common for founders to you know fully focus their 100% or even 200% only on their business, and if they don't control, like, they have to, first of all, not define themselves only by their company. They're, we're humans, we have so many different aspects. We should focus on our family, our social relationships, our health, and so on. So when people usually are so obsessed with one, just their startup, and put all their energy, work 24/7, miss vacations, don't exercise properly, don't eat properly, eventually, after some time, couple of years, people are like you're like we're like batteries. If you misuse your laptop or mobile battery, with time it will stop functioning, and you have to replace your battery or your whole laptop, for example. But for us humans, you can't replace your battery. You have to take care of your battery, and yeah, and have the right support system. In my case, I was like very obsessed with the business. I spent very little time on other things in life, and and this was even before COVID, and after COVID it became even more challenging. Yeah, and when I had this burnout for like the past final few months before me stepping down, like I wasn't able even to open my email inbox for like 3 months. That was like how burnt out I've reached. Uh, yeah, I after that I tried executive coaching. I spent more time with my family. When we stayed home during COVID, suddenly I have like three kids. I like was surprised to see them, like they're sort of grown up, and I felt like who are those guys? Like I I really need to spend more time with them. So yeah, so my decision to prioritize my health and spending more time with my family and kids, I think paid off a bit better today. I took a well deserved break, and ideally, if you don't take enough breaks, you'll be your body will force you to take those breaks.
Wonderful. The things are working out that way. And but there's always this like contradiction in the advice given to founders. So On the one hand, we're told it's hard. You have to work 24 by 7. You have to hustle, hustle, hustle. And you're always selling. You're always, finding ways to grow. And you have to grow very quickly and things like that. So there's that narrative. And at the same time, we're told, you have to balance your life. There are other things. Don't connect your identity to your startup and things like that. So do you think where's the middle ground here? Or is it even realistic to have balance at the early days of a startup?
At the early days, of course, it's more challenging. However, if you start with the right team, you can at least distribute this effort across like two or three people. In my case, I was like after my co-founder left, I spent the next 10 years as a solo founder. Of course, we had like senior executives and so on join, but the early period, usually two or three founders is better. With solo founders, it's usually more difficult unless they do hire very strong early team alongside them. uh, yeah, it's definitely challenging. But what I've realized is that at some point, like startup work doesn't ever end, and uh, if you have to have like hard stops on your daily schedule, on the weekend, uh, somehow, so you don't get completely drained. But yeah, it is definitely challenging, and but you need to still manage it, and things take time. You have to be a bit more patient, but yeah, easier said than done.
Yep, exactly. So, as you mentioned before, things came back full circle for you in the sense that you started with the incubator from ITIDA, set up by ITIDA. That was the beginning of your story as a startup, and then eventually you were selected to join the board of this organization, ITIDA, the governmental organization responsible for supporting the tech industry in Egypt. Of course, like entrepreneurs aren't famous for fitting in with government and public kind of roles. So, what made you accept this position, and what would you like to achieve during your service?
Yeah, so it was funny that I was asked to join the board of ITIDA. Again, the ITIDA is the IT Industry Development Agency in Egypt. It's part of the Ministry of ICT, and it's an entity, the organization that's focused on developing the tech sector, including startups, tech skills development, and so on in Egypt. It's been around for like almost 20 years now. And when I was asked to join it, this was like sort of the same day or the next day after I decided to step down from my business. Although they didn't really know, it wasn't a public announcement. However, it's sort of like just planned that this is from God, that I'll decide to step down here, and then the same day there's like a new door or something new to keep me busy, which was actually very useful for me to keep me distracted from leaving my business. Usually, it's if it, I was very very involved with my company. It's like my baby for 12 years, and then suddenly I have to step down and completely need to leave it because of this burnout. So actually getting this opportunity to join a board and have a different role supporting the ecosystem was it was a great timing. And the experience also was very different from running a startup with things are super fast, super agile, to set up where it's like government or semi-government. Like the half of the board, it's like a 12 members board, six from private sector, six from government entities. We had like majority of the private sector where corporate banking people, and only like two of us who are actual founders of startups. um, yeah, and yeah, it's I'm obviously the youngest person on the board, and coming in with a very different mindset and mentality. But then eventually I was able to do enough impact by telling people in the government the needs, the actual needs of the ecosystem as a representative of the ecosystem. uh, Board dynamics are very challenging at this scale, or very different than from what you would see at in a startup. Also, same time, I joined the board of a publicly listed company here in Egypt called EG Trans, in the transportation logistics
Yep.
space. Fa- the mindset, managing dynamics of a board versus managing dynamics of a startup, was very different and exciting for me, which led me to sign up for this program of to be certified board member, so IFC certified program, and also made me read this book, Startup Boards by Brad Feld, which is sort of like translates what should happen on boards of startups, because the objective of a board in an early stage startup is completely different from a public company, from a private company, from a government entity, and how to manage the best the dynamics in order to provide the best direction and control for this entity.
Right. Cool. I want to ask you, Amir, if you could go back 11 years and give your younger self advice based on what you know now, as you're starting your company, what would you tell yourself?
I would tell myself to take it easy.
Take it easy. Do you think, I mean, realistically, if you had taken it easy, you would be where you are now? Or would you have left the company and joined a corporate job?
um, I'm not sure. Like I'm definitely not a corporate job person. I can't work really in big entities with rules and so on. I really like to be in a situation where I have flexibility and freedom. Um, yeah, I'm not sure where I would have been, but again, I believe that there could have been a way where I could have accomplished the same without completely getting burnt out. But again, this is like part of the journey. Like I believe that we as humans, we are like built in a way where we have to go through experiences to get these learnings, and it's all about the journey and what you do with these learnings. Yeah, and so I'm happy with my journey. I'm happy with the mistakes I've made. uh, I wouldn't really change them, but this would be still the advice I would give myself.
Interesting. And I guess part of it is also what you mentioned before. Like you can take it easy by simply not connecting your own identity to the startup. I mean, still working hard, but not taking it like almost don't take it personally, so to speak, or don't consider it your
Yeah.
personal yeah burden.
Uh, Again, I think the part that in the mindset that needs to change is people need to sort of accept the fact that they control the efforts, but they don't always control the results. Okay, there is,
Yep.
yeah, if you believe that you are doing your best, and once you know that you've really done your best, then you should try to relax. Okay, and leave the things to happen, but trying to force results and control all the results with so many different external factors is usually what results in frustration.
Exactly. Yeah. Trying to control things actually nobody can control.
Yeah, and there are times when I did a ton of effort for a certain outcome. I just keep trying endlessly, where I could just take a rest. You did your best, try again tomorrow, try a different route. If it doesn't work, just take it easy, try something else. It's like the way you would do with a product iterations to reach product market fit. You keep iterating. what's sometimes stressful for a lot of founders is the limited timeline, the runway. And but this is, how VC is designed, which is another, part. When you ask me, what do founders don't know, is that for every founder, their company is like their 100%. Okay, and if it fails, it's like usually a big, very big event for them. Although it shouldn't be as tragic as it is for most of them. But on the VC side, usually funds, they have like 20 or 30 companies, for example, in their portfolio, and the model is built around a big chunk of them actually failing. For VCs, a company failing is not a major event unless it's like the biggest investment in the fund, and it's just another day in the life of a VC. For a company to fail, it happens. Right? We've done our best, but it happens. We have That's why there's a portfolio and to manage. So this is like very different mindset, and usually this is what generates a lot of friction on boards. Is that when VCs are involved in boards, they have a lot of other companies, and for the founder, this is the only company they have, and this is you know creates some friction.
Yeah, and that reminds me of, I think, a difference that I feel. Maybe you can tell me if it's wrong. That in the region versus Silicon Valley, in Silicon Valley, it seems that second time or third time founders, even if they didn't do well with their first startup, they're welcome because these are people who've kind of learned a lot of things along the way, and now they are actually even more motivated to be successful, to prove everyone that they are, capable of it. Whereas here in the region, it feels like it's not as acceptable, maybe, or maybe investors are not so happy to invest in second time founders who haven't had a success in the first one. Would From your viewpoint, on the other side of the table, do you think that's true, or?
I think it's depends on, as the market matures, you have more second time founders, then you have more investments in those founders. And from an operator, VC type of person, I would definitely consider second time founders in a favorable way, if they still did have some traction, or have at least kept a good reputation, relationships with people that they've worked with. I think the region for many years lacked second time founders, because most of those who failed early on, they didn't really find enough funding or support to go with their next startup, and a lot of them left the region to work with like big techs or well-funded companies in other markets. But you have like a brain drain of failed founders. But this is like, in the past few years, couple of years, it's again starting to get better, because there is again more funding was available across the MENA region. But you have other startups to join, or investors to invest in you. I think it's definitely getting better over the past couple of years.
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, I know of a couple of very good second time who would have been great second time founders, but they end up, for example, joining Kareem or Uber or something like that, and they created a lot of success for these big companies, but really they could have been great founders.
Again,
Uh,
these journey is different. Again, like if
exactly.
someone
Yeah,
ended up going to Kareem for a couple of years, then this was like it was meant to be anyways.
of course.
And
Yes, yes,
it's a journey, and there's no time, there's no limit on when you can do another startup again.
I agree. So the thing about venture capital is you need an exit at some point for the investors. This has been. I mean, how do you see the different exit options for startups in our region?
uh, Definitely they were like super limited in the past years. They're definitely getting a bit better. IPOs are still rare to happen. Right now, like Saudi Arabia is sort of leading this route, this period of time. They have an active public market and a lot of companies lined up to go public there. I think companies listing on international and US based didn't go as well as planned for some of the IPOs. And there's the M&A market, which definitely should accelerate and is sort of accelerating. There's a couple of companies I know of who are, or people I know of who are working on building platforms for those, facilitating M&As, secondary markets, and so on. And yeah, this becomes more and more important with time. And yeah, that's definitely still lacking in the region.
Yeah. If you had a magic wand and there was one thing you can change about the region in terms of creating exit options, what would you do?
I think part of it is maturity from the ecosystem, and facilitating such more more of those M&As and exits. So this is like the most common exit is through M&As and secondary markets. Again, you need to have markets where people are willing to buy and sell, and uh, yeah, it's a maturity part, but also it's support from the government. So our region requires more understanding from the government how to support, and how a lot of startups in our region, in Egypt specifically, they're building things that could disrupt and improve a lot of industries, even the even in the health tech and ed tech, for example, and everything. And but governments are still not, are they're also again maturing on how to understand startups and how to support them, and how to help them get to IPO even in the local markets. I think definitely you need more exits for things to start accelerating again. um, yeah.
Nice. So you've been on boards, investors, you've been a founder, etc. What are the characteristics of the best board directors in your opinion?
So again, for founder building a board, ideally the best boards in general are the most diverse. So you need people from different backgrounds that are hopefully relevant. By diversity it means like if you're like product, the founders are product oriented, you need someone like who's commercial or finance oriented. If you have like all male team, for example, you might consider getting a female board member, for example. So because like this diversity brings in different thoughts and opinions, which is becomes very useful. And as the company matures, like in early stage, if you have early stage, you would need to have someone who's sort of done it before, built startups before. At a larger stage, or series A and B, with you've raised big amounts of money, you need board members who have been on boards, or chaired boards before, or have sort of like control or audit experience, because like need to have some initial governance on how you spend. We've seen examples in our region and also globally where startups raised a ton amount of money, and if all the board members are VCs who are like continuously pushing for growth, usually this is not the best option. Like even in the startup boards book by Brad Feld, like he has this advice of most VCs are very bad board members, and you'd rather have operating people on boards giving the founder actual real life experience, or whatever the company requires at the different stage. Yeah, it depends on the stage of the business and where it's at, but it needs to be diverse.
Okay. And if I'm a founder and I have like, I'm choosing between two or three investors, maybe I'm lucky, I have more than one term sheet to put on our cap table. What would be the things you would advise me to avoid most if I see them in the investor while I'm choosing them?
Yeah. So investments is like a people game. That's like people investing in people. And from a founder's perspective, you're selecting a partner for the long term. So in my case, for example, I have investors who are on my cap table now for almost 10 years, and we still interact. You need to, you know, first of all, like ask about those investors, ask other founders about them, to make sure that they're supportive, they're credible, and so on, and also talk to founders who have failed before with them. And this is like where you really see the the true colors of an investor. Yeah, nothing tells you more than asking other founders about them and how they're supportive or not.
Right. So, first of all, I guess your advice is do due diligence on the investors like they do due diligence on you. And when you do, ask about the bad times as well as the good times, so to speak.
Yes.
Yeah, cool. So, I mean, in Khwarizmi, you didn't, I think you led the investment in Blueworks, which is an HR company. So it's kind of in the same industry that you had a lot of background in. You think sometimes people say, I find it hard to invest in my industry because I know too much about how things can go wrong. And sometimes it's the opposite. I mean, how did you approach this and maybe your biases while investing in Blueworks?
So for me, like I know the HR space very well. Been in it for like more than 15 years now. And at one point, I wanted to build, you know, build my own HR system integrated with Wuzzuf, and this was like part of the plan even before COVID. And yeah, but then plans changed and we didn't get to do it. And then moving on the VC side, I also met a lot of other HR SaaS businesses across the region. Did due diligence on a couple of them, and I still believed in this space. uh, but yeah, and for me, like Blueworks was a company that I know the market need is there. The founders are passionate. I know the industry inside out, and yeah, and this is a company I can support from my experience and understanding the space. And also, HR tech is usually not one of those cool and trendy spaces, and most VCs in the region don't really get it that much because it needs someone who's been an operator to see how challenging it is to manage operations, and there is no enough HR software out there to support them. But this is where like I have insights which most other VCs don't see, and I've found like a team that can execute on this problem.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if my information is correct. Did you invest pre-product? I mean, before the product was in the market or after that?
Yes, pre-product. Yeah.
So how did you gain the confidence like that early? And I love that it's a courageous kind of decision.
Yeah, so definitely investing pre-product is challenging, but again, because I know the space and I know this team is passionate enough to solve it, and I will be helping them, figure out, what team members they need to bring on board, and who are, people I can connect them with. And they were already speaking to clients and customers. If you have, the right mindset, the problem you're solving, you have advisors who've done it before in this space. This is like the way we sort of mitigated this risk, because I know the space very well, and what they explained to us about what they're gonna build is the right product that needs to be built.
Cool. Great. I usually ask, how you see Basharsoft 10 years from now, to end this initial round, but you've already mentioned it, and I'm looking forward to seeing like 10 million people hired through your platforms across the region, inshallah, and an IPO and an exit. So I'll go into the closing questions. Um, Amir, what book do you like to recommend to others, or books?
What? Yeah. Um, yeah. So actually, like one of the first books I read even before starting my business was the Founders at Work, which tells the stories of different founders in their early days. This was like I would recommend this to anyone who's just starting or thinking of doing their own startup. There is also another book which is the hard thing about hard things. I think Ben Woods. Also, this is useful for founders who are like around Series A or later stage, maybe Series A or pre-Series A. It's useful to how to the different challenges CEOs face. Uh, there is also the growth handbook. This is not like growth marketing. It's about like how growing organizations and how like to grow the marketing function with actual examples of how to grow this function, how to grow the HR and people, how to grow product and so on. So it's like a sort of reference book on organizational growth. uh, I read a ton of books during my time, and also a lot of readings online on how to build a company. But again, if I would go back in time, I would advise myself to actually hire people who have done those things in practice than trying to read everything and understand everything on your own. Yeah.
Yeah, that probably wasn't an option back in 2014, though.
Yeah, but I still would give myself advice back then.
So, okay, second question. How do you unwind and how do you stay energized?
So so again, I burnt out because of not because of the company, it's because of my role. So I continued, as a CEO as the company grew, but the CEO role evolved in different ways that were not very exciting for me. Like now when I'm going back to the company, actually I'm not involved in running day to day as a CEO. I'm actually a bit focused on some strategic initiatives and projects, and also focus on product. So I actually get super energized working on product myself. I'm a sort of a product CEO. When I'm doing something that I really enjoy, the actual day to day tasks, this keeps me energized. Other than that, it's like spending time with family and kids. uh, yeah, so that's like and I yeah, and discussing these days are more into understanding more about the human experience and life, and the different journeys and psychology of people, how they think about things. So this is like where I'm actually excited about these days.
Interesting. And yeah, I mean, it's a great idea to like do what to energizes you, and then you'll be happy while you're working. So that's great. I was just hearing about Phil Knight, who was the founder of Nike. In his biography, he was like he used to sell mutual funds and insurance and things like that, and he was very bad at that. And then when he did his shoes and he would sell them, he would actually find it very easy to sell them because he loved running, and so he was energized by selling them. So it was the same action, but it made a huge difference that he loved what he was doing. Next question: who do you think we should have as guests on the podcast?
So there is someone uh, I've known recently when I joined the board in ITIDA. I was not a board member and the only other founder on the board with me, Dr. Hisham Haddara. I'm not sure if you know him or not. He's the founder of a company called Cyware. They're, it's a deep tech company. He's sort of like the godfather of semiconductor businesses in Egypt. He's, worked with different companies, advised a lot of companies in Egypt in this space. A lot of people get, surprised to know that there is a semiconductor industry in Egypt. But actually, this is like the space where Egypt had probably the most of exits in Egypt,
Mm-hmm.
and even there's like more than 50 semiconductor companies in Egypt, and he recently helped Egypt have its own chapter of the Global Semiconductor Alliance, which is like a global network and has opens up in very few selected markets, and he has helped start this in Egypt
Incredible.
a year or two. Yeah, and I also was involved with him on this trip to in a program in MIT over the past 2 years. And yeah, the guy has like very deep experience about deep tech in Egypt, and on a global scale. Definitely would recommend on your show.
Cool. And what question should I have asked you that I didn't?
uh, yeah, what's my definition of success?
Okay, that's a lovely question. Would you like to answer it now, or?
Yeah, I discovered recently that this is like one of the most important questions I usually ask a lot of people, because a lot of times we assume that everyone has like the same definition of success. At one point, like it was all about, for me it was about like being the first, being a pioneer in what I'm doing, uh, raising a lot of, proving that we can raise funding and grow the company, hiring, increasing our headcount, proving this is a big business for. And this was like my definition of success in many different times. The short version right now is like, just living a good life, a healthy life, enjoying my family, and still try to do impact. There's of course more details to it, but I think this is like a very important question a lot of people don't ask.
Yeah, I think there's a good book actually about this. How to, I think it was called "How to Measure a Successful Life" or something like it, by Clayton Christensen, the guy who did the Innovator's Dilemma. So I might recommend it to people. But it's a great question. So before we wrap up, how can people reach you if somebody wants to reach out to you about an investment, about something related to Basharsoft, about something else? And is there anything you want to announce or anything like that? This is like your chance.
Yeah, so reaching me is a bit challenging. Yeah, being the founder of the leading job site in Egypt. I receive so many incoming requests for partnerships, or even people looking for jobs, companies trying to hire. It's usually very noisy on my email, my WhatsApp, and so on. So this is difficult to reach. Even on LinkedIn, it's challenging. I think the best way, not just to reach me, but to reach any, also applies to a lot of VCs, is through warm introductions, people that I know well, or we have in common. Yeah, and reaching me through those people. Yeah, direct outreach is usually can fall through the cracks. But yeah, and in terms of announcing things, yeah, it's as I mentioned, we're expanding Wuzzuf to the GCC and to Africa. We've helped 1 million people get hired. We're planning to get the next 10 million people get hired. We help SMEs, we help solve employment challenges across the region. Yeah, so that's like what we're building, and yeah, we're always on the lookout for people to partner with on this front.
Great. So thank you very much for your time. I like to close things out on a note of gratitude. So, what is a gift someone has given you that had a large effect, positive effect on you and your life?
Um, yeah, I think we receive gifts all the time, every day. I think the gift of health for me is the thing I think most people underestimate. Yeah, I don't have a specific gift from a person, but this is gift from God. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah. We always have to have gratitude to Allah Subhanahu wa Taala. All right. Thank you very much, Amir. It's been a real joy to have this conversation.
thank you, Ali. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye bye.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Startups Arabia podcast. If there was something you really liked about what the guest said today, reach out to them on social media and tell them what you liked. And of course, if you haven't subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? You don't want to miss any of our great upcoming episodes. Also, please rate us and give us comments on our social media accounts so that we know how to improve. And also tell us what you like. We don't mind hearing that either. Until next time, this was your host, Ali's Whale.